Hello, everyone. We are live. We are back. Sorry, I'm just uploading my promotional video to TikTok because I haven't been doing that lately, which is dumb. I just got to put the captions on it right now. Talking about Andrew Yang's Forward Party. That's something we're going to do today. We're also going to teach Marxism to Kyle Kulinski. Gonna be sweet. All right, so TikTok is uploaded. Since we're teaching Marxism to Kyle Kulinski today, I've got my LaCroix because we know Kyle Kulinski and the other progressives are controlled by Big Seltzer, the big sparkling water industry. LOL. Sup, comrade Joe Kino swag. Thank you. I try. Oh man, let me finish uploading these. Teaching Marxism to Kyle Kulinski. It ain't easy, folks. It ain't easy teaching Marxism to these progressives, but we got to do it. We got to do it because there are, there are just a whole bunch of progressives on YouTube, and there's not as many Marxist-Leninists. And, a lot of people come to the left via progressives. I came to the left via Kyle Kulinski, it'd be fair to say. He's the one who showed me that social democracy was cool. See, I mean, what never made sense to me, and I remember saying this in my high school government class a bunch, how are we allowing people to die of starvation while we spend this much money on war, while the U.S. spends so much money bombing and drone striking people? So, with that common sense idea in mind, I found Kyle Kulinski, who says, yeah, socialism's always failed and stuff, but we can do social democracy. We can have a little bit of socialism as a treat, and all we have to do is vote for enough AOCs and enough Bernie Sanders, and eventually we'll basically have socialism. So it's useful for bringing people to the left. It sort of forms a left-wing tanky pipeline, I think, but only if we build that pipeline all the way to Marxism, right? Only if we say, hey, Kyle Kulinski fans, here's what Marxism's all about. If anyone can tank pill Kyle, you can, Eddie. Thank you, Radio Free America. Thank you. I appreciate that you have so much support in me. Hey, Eddie, when is the debate? Not for a little bit because the Libertarians were busy this week, and then Carlos is busy too, and I really want to do the debate with Carlos. I mean, doing it with Noah would be fine too, or not more than fine. Doing it with Noah would be great. It's just that Carlos has read Dialectics of Nature so recently, right? And we're debating dialectical materialism and scientific socialism. So it's like if we can, I don't know, if Carlos can really dig into some of his research and some of the recent findings in Marxist ecology and in anthropology, because Engels, in his application of dialectical materialism to science and anthropology was years ahead of its time, because of, the theory of dialectical materialism. That's what allowed him to see beyond so many of the scientists and anthropologists of his day. So this libertarian idea that, dialectical materialism is a pseudoscience or whatever, I mean, Carlos is just going to be able to rip that idea apart, so I want him to do it. Noah would be able to as well, but sorry, let me just share this here stream. Share this here stream on Twitter. So we can get our Twitter comrades up in here. Excuse me. It's that seltzer. It's that darn big seltzer. Streaming on YouTube and Twitch, teaching Marxism to Kyle Kulinski and more. And more, folks. We're teaching Kyle Kulinski Marxism, and we're talking about some other stuff, including Andrew Yang's Forward Party. Because Kyle Kulinski talks about UBI in his video, and Andrew Yang is a big UBI guy because he's a dirty, rotten capitalist who doesn't understand that socialism is the only way out. All right, tweet has been sent, and we are ready. We should be set for a while. Yo, hello. How's wrestling going? Good. We've had a break for a while, which has been really nice for me to read and work on my Venezuela book, work on the website, do more streaming. So I've really enjoyed taking a little break. Where Pilgrim's here. Hey, everybody. Hello, Where Pilgrim. Welcome back to another episode. Hi, working here to listen. Working so here to working so here to listen. Thank you for your labor. Well, thank you for your labor, comrade. You're the one putting in real labor right now. This is real labor. I need to stop like working on the website and streaming and educating and reading is so fun. And I find it so useful and productive for socialist ends that sometimes I don't even think of it as work or labor. And sometimes I work too hard and I wear myself out and put too much on my plate. So it is good to think of it as labor, but not the same as the labor of the working mass or the blue collar working class or even service industry working class. Then I also work as a wrestling coach and get grad school with that. So I'm technically a student and a academic, I guess you could say. Hi, I don't know if you remember me, but I said that DPRK and China are not socialist, and I watched that video you recommended, My Brothers and Sisters in the North, along with other sources. It completely changed my view. I'm still unsure about the PRC, though. Thanks for the recommendation. Wow. Great to hear, Comrade Zerk. Thank you for checking out My Brothers and Sisters in the North. That is a beautiful documentary movie. Even if you don't leave that movie, supporting the DPRK and being like the DPRK is socialist and good and anti-imperialist, like it just breaks down a lot of the biases and a lot of the preconceived notions about people in North Korea. If nothing else, it shows you that they're people. They're just people. Like they're not the stories that the U.S. tells about North Korea makes them seem almost inhuman, right? Like they're just so different from us as a culture that we can't even wrap our heads around it. They just all, listen to the Kim family, and their every word is what goes, and it's just not true at all, And the courage and the cooperation and the intelligence that the people of the DPRK have had in maintaining their sovereignty and building socialism is incredibly admirable and worth learning about. I don't know if I sent this video last time, but I did a long video about the construction of modern China. Now I know I told you to watch a whole documentary movie last time, which is, a lot of content. But now I'm going to send you a 36-minute video as well as like another 36-minute video. So you can watch even more content. But this is a video about the construction of modern China, meaning socialist China and U.S. imperialism in China. And this is a video where I was responding to Vijay Prashad, or rather just using a video from Vijay Prashad. And this one's only 17 minutes to answer the question, is China a Marxist country? That's literally the title of the videos. Is China a Marxist country or a socialist country? So you can check that one out. Hopefully that one is also something that you learned from. But yeah. Isn't the purpose of social democracy to prevent socialism in first world countries? Yeah. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but that's one of the things that social democracy does. And we're going to talk about that today. I got the notification from Facebook, LOL. That's funny. Because Facebook is always where we have the least viewers and the least people interacting with our stuff. But thank you for following us on Facebook, Isaiah. Even though you posted this comment from YouTube. RIP Shireen Abu Akla says, yo, hello. I like your username. Postal worker here. Let's go. Shout out to you, Isaiah. Shout out to the Postal Service. A public service. One of the closest services you can get to socialism in the U.S. and one that's been constantly dismantled. One of the worst things that Trump did was try and dismantle and privatize the Postal Service. That darn jerk. What are you reading right now? Also, I hope everyone here has a good day. Thank you. I hope you're having a good day too. We're going to start talking about Kyle Kulinski at about 15 minutes in, by the way, y'all. I just want to interact with the chat for the first 15 minutes here. But I am reading The Assassination of Julius Caesar by Michael Parenti, which is a people's history or alternative history on Julius Caesar and his assassination. Basically arguing that Caesar was a populist who wanted to enact various pro-working class, pro-laboring class, pro-slave reforms at a time when rebellion and class struggle was threatening to tear apart the Roman Empire because of this aristocratic class of oligarchs who was so heavily exploiting the mass of Rome. And this is what led to the conspiracy among, oligarchic, aristocratic politicians and senators, eventually killing Caesar to prevent him from gaining any more support with the masses and threatening their wealth anymore, which would then kick off Rome's era of dictators who were known as Caesars, which would see horrible authoritarian, dictatorial policies, continued worsening wealth inequality, which worsened class struggle, rebellion, and eventually led to the toppling and collapse of Rome. So I'm reading that, and then I'm reading Lectures on the History of Philosophy by Hegel, which is what I've been really hammering lately. One sec here. This is Lectures on the History of Philosophy. George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. I don't know if when I first got into Marx, I was like, I'm never going to read Hegel, maybe way down the line, but like I have to get a grasp of Marx. And, now I'm reading I was reading Capital Volume 2. And I'm like, now that I've read Capital Volume 1 twice and I have a good grasp of Marxism, I feel like it would help me to go back to Hegel and see what Marx is building off of. Because obviously Marx was a Hegelian, and people always say, excuse me, Marx took Hegel's philosophy from an idealist philosophy and made it materialist. Or Marx took Hegel's philosophy further. Or Marx flipped Hegel's philosophy on its head. Or it was standing on its head and Marx flipped it upright. So I wanted to see what Hegel was about specifically. I asked Carlos if that would be a good idea before reading Capital Volume 2. He's like, yes, Hegel will help you understand Capital Volume 2 better. Start with the Lectures on the History of Philosophy. Like, okay, so I did that, and he was 100% correct. It is tough to understand Hegel, but it's not as tough as people make it out to be, honestly. Just you just got to struggle with it and use some reading guides or whatever. But, Lenin, Mao, Engels, pretty much every Marxist thinker, Che Guevara, any Marxist thinker I can think of that led a revolution or worth their salt said, Marxists, communists have to read Hegel. Like, that is a task that's set out for us. Marx built off Hegel's work. So it's useful to read Hegel and understanding Marx. And I've seen people argue that it's not useful. Those people are just wrong. Those people are just wrong. You can totally see where Marx is basing a lot of his philosophy on when you read Hegel. And really, Hegel is not that idealist of a thinker, right? He's more making a materialist analysis of the development of human thought and human intellect over time. So, yeah, shout out to that. Have you ever felt slash believed anything that contradicted the literature you've read, and how did you handle internalizing or responding to that? Have you ever felt or believed anything? Oh, so like had anything I believe contradicted by the literature? Definitely. I mean, all the time. All the time. And that's the point of reading. And I love to read stuff that I don't agree with. And the way Hegel understands this is, we all have this implicit, finite amount of information in our minds. But, collectively, we can continue to analyze the infinite world, the infinite information and knowledge that there is to understand in the world. And, by doing so, by thinking and by reading, we change the information implicit in our minds, right? We change our preconceived notions. We add new information. We figure out other conclusions that we previously held are not true. And in doing so, we become smarter and come to understand the world better. So, yeah. All right, one more question. I know you hate NATO, but is there something you can say nice or that you agree with NATO? No, NATO, and even if NATO is pretending to be somewhere for human rights, like if there's NATO peacekeepers somewhere, they're not keeping the peace. They're increasing hostility, increasing aggression. NATO was supposed to be disbanded at the fall of the Soviet Union. NATO was supposedly a military alliance to stop the spread of the Soviet Union and protect the Western countries, the liberal democracies' security interests. Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, yet NATO is still expanding. Yet in 1999, NATO carpet bombed Yugoslavia, even though it's an organization that's not supposed to exist at all. It's an organization based on lies. Lies. Bro got beef with NATO. I like that. Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Chuck. All right. I will be right back, and then we will start our main event, teaching Marxism to Kyle Kulinski. I just got to run to the bathroom quick. Actually, I'll pull up a video that y'all can watch during intermission. Because I have to run to the bathroom, and I also have to grab my notes for this section. So, actually, I'll pull up an old video from my old YouTube channel, Neon Sky 13, and I'll find something good. Try and find. Here we go. This is a great video. Enjoy watching The Bomb. This video I made in high school.
Listen,
I'll be right
here,
back.
Eddie. You better tell me where that bomb is right now before I put one of these in your butt. Listen here, right now, guy. I ain't ever telling you where the jewels, where the bomb is. So why don't you get on out of here? Do you know how bad it hurts to get shot in the knee? 'Cause you're about to if you don't tell me where that bomb is. Yeah, right. You don't have the guts. Ow! Ow! My knee. Yeah, I did. And guess how many knees you have? You have 2 knees, and I'll shoot you in the other one if you don't tell me where the bomb. Ow! Yeah, that'll teach you. Now I shot you in the stomach. So why don't you and your goons get on out of here? I ain't telling you where I hid the bomb. Listen, if you think one gun wound is gonna stop me, then you've got another thing coming. Oh! Who shoots somebody in the foot? I warned you to get out of here. Now this is your final warning. The next one won't be. The next one will be right in your face. Wait, is that the bomb? Oh, what do you mean, this? No, that's not the bomb. Yeah, that's the bomb. It says the bomb right on it. You stupid idiot. Oh, so what? You found the bomb. You're not going to be able to do anything because you're going to be dead. Ugh! Ah! Now, for the bomb.
Pretty good stuff, am I right, folks? Historians will study this video, absolutely. Blockbuster classic. Wholesome. Old video, I can definitely tell. Turned in to learn about Marxism and capital accumulation. I'm not disappointed. Okay. Sorry I made you all watch that, but thank you for your kind compliments. Let's learn about Marxism and capital accumulation for real. Starting with this video by Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk. The top 1% has taken 50 trillion from the bottom 90%. For those who don't know, as I've said on stream many a time, Kyle Kulinski is what really got me into the left. You know, when I was in high school, I was a fan of The Amazing Atheist, who's like a Bernie bro, social democrat, who's also like basically a conservative when it comes to like social issues and stuff. He makes all these like anti-feminist videos, or at least that's what he did. And then I found Kyle Kulinski in college, and I was like, this guy seems more rational. He's mostly focused on policy. You know, he's saying, why are we spending all our money bailing out corporations and paying for imperialistic wars of aggression rather than helping the American people? And I learned a lot from that, and I really liked it. Later, I would discover Marxism and discover I had a lot of criticisms of social democrats and progressives like Kyle. However, he was a good starting point for me, a sort of gateway into Marxism. And what I've been trying to do with this series, teaching Marxism to Kyle Kulinski, is sort of help facilitate that same transition for a lot of people. Help people who Kyle has gotten into left-wing politics, left-wing economic values, teach those people about Marxism, teach them the failures of reformism and social democracy, and criticize Kyle's specific talking points about them, while also pointing out where Kyle is right and why people like him. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started.
Brought about by COVID is beginning to reveal itself in stark terms. This is what CNBC says. Yelp data shows 60% of business closures due to the coronavirus pandemic are now permanent. Yelp on Wednesday released its latest economic average report, revealing business closures across the U.S. are increasing as a result of the coronavirus. As of August 31st, 163,735 businesses have indicated on Yelp that they have closed, a 23% increase since mid-July. According to Yelp data, permanent closures have reached 97,966, representing 60% of closed businesses that won't be reopening. This is an aspect of what happened with COVID and the CARES Act that's not discussed nearly enough. But what you're very likely to see happen is, as all of these smaller businesses and medium-sized businesses go under, you have the big businesses swoop in and buy them up. So you have this corporate consolidation and this move towards monopolies, further exacerbating wealth and income inequality. And you have a distinct shift away from small business entrepreneurship and, you know, people kind of controlling their own destiny and making a living that way.
I was thinking about that.
All right, that was a good time for the YouTube video to go to an ad, because that was where I was going to stop it. But you see that the Yelp data says that 60% of businesses who went under during COVID, that the ruling class and the propagandists promised us, you know, this is just a COVID thing. You know, this isn't a deeper economic crisis. These businesses are going to bounce back. We always bounce back together, blah, 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 blah. But now 60% of the small businesses that went under are staying closed. That's 163,755 total. And as Kyle says, this is smaller and mid-sized businesses because they go under and the big ones come in and swoop them up, which he calls corporate consolidation or a move to monopolies, which increases income inequality. And in Marxist terms, this is accumulation and concentration. And this is something that Marx has noticed within capitalism since the very beginning, since the Industrial Revolution. that as capital accumulates, so long as there's no intervention by the government or by organized workers or unions or something, capital is going to continue accumulating and concentrating in a sort of spiral like motion. So less and less people are going to control the wealth and control the means of production. But that group of less and less, smaller and smaller people are going to accumulate more and more and more. And this is exactly what we've seen. As well as what we talked about last week when we were talking about Lenin's imperialism, we've seen a move away from the stage of capitalism which it's based upon, which is free competition between private property owners, and a move into monopoly. There's no longer free market competition, but monopolies which control the markets and make it impossible for small business owners to enter the markets. And I don't think socialists should dismiss the problems of the petty bourgeoisie, meaning like small business owners. Because the petty bourgeoisie, as accumulation and concentration in capitalism's monopoly stage take place and progress and get worse, the petty bourgeoisie are proletarianized, right? If you're a petty bourgeoisie small business owner and your business goes under during an economic crisis as the corporations are getting bailed out by the government, you're going to have to go back to being a worker. You're going to become a wage laborer. You're going to have to sell your labor to somebody who does own capital in order to survive. So as capitalism moves into its monopoly stage, it continually proletarianizes these petty bourgeois small business owners, throws them into the workforce. And historically, the petty bourgeoisie can go either way during times of revolution, right? They'll pretty much side with whoever it looks like is going to win. If it looks like the capitalists are going to win, most of the petty bourgeoisie will side with them. If it looks like the proletariat's going to win, most of the petty bourgeoisie will side with them. So we can't, reject the idea that we would ally with sections of that class or, have allies within that class. People forget that Engels, is the son of a capitalist owner. The son of a capitalist, capital owner, and he used that money, this part of the surplus value, to fund the works of Karl Marx. Marx should not have said, "No, Engels, I'm against capitalism and therefore I'm against your money." It makes no sense. Marx needed to pay for his own means of subsistence, and he was writing revolutionary theory for the overthrow of capitalism. So even though Engels was from a capitalist family, he did more for the revolution than, many, many, many people throughout history. So as I was saying, accumulation and concentration are two things that Marx analyzes within capitalism from the beginning. So what Marx is looking at during his time and sort of during the time of the Industrial Revolution, or its mid stage of progression, or even later stage of progression, is you're seeing all these artisans, all these people whose craft it is to make certain things. Right, their labor can create something that people need, and therefore they're valuable. Or they create, some kind of artwork that's sold at the market during the era of mercantilism. And what's happening to these artisans as capitalism progresses and as capital accumulates and concentrates is they're being proletarianized, the same way the petty bourgeoisie is today. So Marx is watching all these people who are artistically talented or who are very skilled at making something be thrown into conditions of poverty and thrown out of their job as an artisan as mass production is carried on and accumulation and concentration take place and monopolies begin to take hold of capitalism. Capitalism begins to transition out of its stage of free competition and more into its stage of monopolies. So it's a similar sort of effect of proletarianizing the petty bourgeoisie as what Marx observed with the proletarianization of the artisan class. And yeah, again, it's sort of, you can visualize it as sort of a spiral, right? A spiral starts wider at the beginning, and as it concentrates and gets closer to a point, it gets smaller. It's smaller towards the top. So that's the accumulation and the concentration of capital. Lenin obviously talks about in the chapter that we talked about on the last stream in his book Imperialism, how capitalism transitions from its stage of free competition, where private property owners are freely competing with each other on the market, and people are more free to enter the market if you want to become an entrepreneur or a business owner. But once it transitions out of this, once accumulation and concentration lead to more monopolies, which are able to control the market and control the government and the state and use that to control markets, capitalism reaches a new stage, not only a stage of monopoly, which is the opposite of free competition, but it's imperialist stage, because these monopolies are going to capture all the home markets, all the markets domestically, and then they're going to look to go abroad. They're going to look to expand, to export capital. And that's how we get imperialism. And, in modern economics, they talk about a low or a high barrier to entering certain markets. That just basically means new businesses' ability to start a business or start a new firm in a certain industry. If it's really easy to start a new firm, there's a low barrier to entering the market. If it's really tough, there's a high barrier. And almost every, sort of industry in America today has moved away from the stage of free competition, has moved away from low barrier to entry, and has gotten higher, or the barriers to entry have gotten higher and higher and higher and higher, because monopolies so thoroughly control all of our markets.
This is not good. And this is not good. This is not good. If you're a small business enthusiast, this should terrify you. Because let me tell you something, these 60% of business closures, yeah, they're small businesses. The large ones can weather the storm. The large corporations got bailouts, giant bailouts. The crumbs that went to the smaller businesses, it's not enough for them to weather the storm. And so we're going to see this giant consolidation. And listen,
Absolutely. I mean, he's calling it consolidation, but obviously the sort of scientific term that Marx gives this is accumulation or concentration. And he notices something vital in this process of accumulation, especially in the modern era, especially within the last 40 years of capitalism. And that's the government bailouts of big corporations, the large bourgeoisie in times of economic crisis. So Lenin analyzed the state as it exists under capitalism, the government, as a dictatorship of capital. Right? Before we can achieve socialism, the working class has to seize political power, creating a dictatorship of the workers or a dictatorship of the proletariat. But as the state currently exists, it's not a liberal democracy. It's not controlled by the people. It is a dictatorship of capital, because capital accumulation has led to capitalists controlling the media, controlling the news, controlling the education systems, and having more and more influence in government, to the point now where they passed Citizens United in the United States about 10 years ago now, basically legalizing political bribery, literally saying that corporations' money counts as free speech. And because our country protects freedom of speech, corporations are able to donate as much to campaigns as they want, or to super PACs, or to lobby for various bills. And most of our bills, most of our policies are literally written by corporate lobbyists now. They're not even written by the politicians we elect. So it's obvious that this system is an oligarchy or a dictatorship of capital. Those who own capital, not necessarily the petty bourgeois small business owners, but the giant corporations, who own vast amounts of capital, are the ones who control the government. This is how it's always worked under capitalism. Now they're going to use the government then to help them out in any way that they can, to help themselves accumulate capital, to concentrate and to concentrate capital at the top and maximize their surplus value, maximize their profits, maximize how much money they're able to invest in expanding their capitalist empire. So that's something Lenin notices about the state under capitalism, and something that we got from Marx is an analysis of the constant crises of capitalism. Crises are inherent to capitalism. In modern Western economics, this is called the business cycle, right? You go through times of recession and slowdown, and you build back up and go through times of prosperity, and it just goes up and down like this. These are crises of overproduction, crises when there's too much produced, but the workers aren't paid enough money to buy back what they're producing. And we get various crises created. These are also exacerbated by banking, which develops in the monopoly stage of capitalism. Banks banks induced the 2008 financial crisis by giving a bunch of loans to people who couldn't afford houses, jacking up the interest rates on those loans. And then when people couldn't pay them back, the banks would just evict them from their house or whatever else. And eventually a vast amount of people couldn't pay back their loans, and all the big banks went under before being bailed out by the government, because the government is a dictatorship of capital. So in these times of crises, which are incessant, which happen over and over and over and over again, they never do anything for the workers. They never even really do anything for the small businesses. They just give millions and millions of our tax dollars to big banks and big corporations to bail them out, allow them to keep going. So yeah, dictatorship of capital.
There's some big businesses I like, of course, but I would love it if we still had the option to go to small business restaurant, for example, and this really is kind of like a death blow to another aspect of what would commonly be called the American dream. 60% of business closures are now permanent. Think about all the lives that were destroyed. Now, as this is going on, I got more for you. The top.
We'll go back to that, but I mean, he's right. And that has to do with what I was saying. Don't just dismiss small business owners or the petty bourgeoisie because they exploit people or because they have exploited people. They have, but a lot of their livelihoods have just been crushed. 160,000 plus of these small and medium-sized businesses have just gone under. And those are people who are in the working class now. They lost everything, so they're going to have to become wage laborers, or they're not going to be able to survive. So it's good to talk about this and to point out what's happening and give an analysis of this concentration. And I like what Kyle said there about the death blow to the American dream, because it really is. The American dream is the idea, that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that in America, there's always going to be a low enough barrier to entry with our markets. There's always going to be enough free competition to where anybody, who has a good idea and works hard can create a good life for them or their family, can start a small business. And, the American dream includes the idea that working people should be paid enough to support themselves and their family. But small businesses is definitely part of it. And we're seeing how capitalism is never going to allow the American dream to be a thing. Capitalism is always going to lead to accumulation, concentration, and the maximization of capitalist exploitation. The minimization of workers' wages and paying for workers' health care. And actually, they're going to, use the healthcare system to make money off people. Capitalism just commodifies everything and finds a way to use everything to exploit people. It's never going to allow for this utopian system of free competition that libertarians imagine. And if we look at 21st century socialism, you could, draw these comparisons with China and other socialist countries. But Nicaragua is one I like to bring up because they have created programs for budding entrepreneurs. They have started programs helping working class people get their small business ideas off the ground. Because they've been exploited by multinational companies for such a long time. Right, their version of socialism isn't like a strictly we just need to seize all of the capital in our country today and immediately transfer it to the workers. Right, they're trying to construct socialism, build socialism in a country that has been damaged by neocolonialism and exploited by Western multinationals for a long time. So part of their construction of socialism is helping small business owners get off the ground. Of course, there are still regulations for how those small businesses treat their workers, socialist regulations, so they don't allow small businesses to just freely exploit people. But developing small business as opposed to giant monopoly foreign multinational corporations just siphoning all their country's resources. They say we prefer the small businesses, right? And part of our construction of socialism is supporting these as opposed to supporting accumulation and concentration. So Yeah, it's just how one of the ways that 21st century socialism has adapted to our current conditions, and has placed themselves sort of, in support of certain sections of the petty bourgeoisie, or in sections, of sections of the proletariat who have a business idea and want to bring themselves out of poverty, as opposed to multinational corporations and conglomerates, which capitalism in its monopoly stage is dominated by. Right, the U.S. empire is dominated by giant banks and corporations. It's not dominated by small business owners. They just don't have the money and power.
1% of Americans have taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90%, and that's made the U.S. less secure. This is not some back-of-the-napkin approximation. According to a groundbreaking new working paper by Carter C. Price and Catherine Edwards of the Rand Corporation, had the more equitable income distributions of the 3 decades following World War II, 1945 through 1974, merely held steady, the aggregate annual income of Americans earning below the 90th percentile would have been $2.5 trillion higher in the year 2018 alone. That is an amount equal to nearly 12% of GDP, enough to more than double median income, enough to pay every single working American in the bottom 9 deciles an additional $1,144 a month. There's your UBI every month, every single year. Price and Edwards calculate that the cumulative tab for our 4-decade-long experiment in radical inequality had grown to over $47 trillion from 1975 through 2018. At a recent pace of about $2.5 trillion a year, that number we estimate crossed the $50 trillion mark by early 2020. That's $50 trillion that would have gone into the paychecks of working Americans had inequality held constant. $50 trillion that would have built a far larger and more prosperous economy. $50 trillion that would have enabled the vast majority of Americans to enter this pandemic far more healthy, resilient, and financially secure. So if we have the same amount of income and wealth inequality that we had in what was called the golden age of economic expansion in the United States, working people would be $50 trillion wealthier. So the top 1% has rigged the game and have effectively taken $50 trillion from the bottom 90%. Isn't that incredible? I mean, you go back, how many?
So he says something really interesting there that I thought was interesting. He says this wealth accumulation and this increase in inequality, which he gave a bunch of really good statistics on, has made the U.S. less secure, as opposed to other times in the history of the U.S. before the last 40 years of trickle-down of Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, neoliberalism. And this is because class struggle increases, working class discontent, rebellion, or riots in certain cases increase when conditions are this bad. When the average person is 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and 60% have experienced medical debt. People are struggling to afford their means of subsistence. Living an everyday life, just working a job and being able to support yourself is becoming almost impossible because of this accumulation. So yes, that leads to riots, or that leads to rebellions, that leads to threats in, quote unquote security. Leads to increases in class struggle. And, he talks about how at other times in America's history, the wealth inequality hasn't been this bad. The early 1900s were a great example. Before that, we had what they call the Gilded Age, another age of just massive inequality, massive concentration at the top. And workers got organized, right? Workers got organized at this time, and they demanded reforms. Since that time, these worker organizations have been crushed. In the last 40 years, since Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher dominated the U.S. and the U.K. and, went ahead with so-called trickle-down economics, they've busted up these unions, busted up our collective bargaining rights, cut into Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, dismantled various welfare programs, including food programs for women and children. We've seen all these reforms that workers organized and fought for destroyed. And also, let's keep in mind that when these workers were organizing under FDR, when they were organizing for these reforms, there were 1 million card-carrying communists in the U.S., right? And after World War II in 1945 to 1950, we saw more wildcat strikes in the U.S. than any other time in our history, because people had a lot of jobs from World War II. And as World War II was ending, they didn't want to lose those jobs or lose their higher wages or lose the benefits that they had fought for. But all these reforms have been dismantled, right? Which leads to working class discontent and various effects of that, which are exacerbated, made worse by medical crises, health crises like COVID-19. It just deepens the economic crises and the economic contradictions that we're already experiencing.
Many times that we talk about this on the show, but you go back to like the 1970s, for example, and you get the CEO to worker pay ratio. Like the CEO would make like 24 times what the average worker would make. Now that's a big difference. That's a big difference. But you know, somewhere within the realm of that which is reasonable. You might say, hey, maybe 10 to 1 is more fair or whatever, but that's where we were. Today it's like 300 or 350 to 1. That's the CEO to average worker pay ratio. This is right in line with that kind of a fact. Like, oh, if we just held steady from what we were doing back then, working people would be $50 trillion richer, and you would be able to weather the storm of a pandemic. But the economy's rigged. All the money's going to the corporations and the wealthy, and so you're screwed. And so 46% of the country has, quote, serious financial problems. 30 some odd percent couldn't pay their rent. And this is going back a couple months now. I don't know how else to say this, guys. We need drastic action now. Now. And the two things that pop up.
And before we get to his solutions, I want to talk about this idea that capitalists have rigged the game. Right? It's sort of this libertarian idea that real capitalism, you know, free competition capitalism, capitalism without the government or whatever. That's not what Kyle believes, but Kyle believes when the government is doing social welfare programs, that's good capitalism, right? That's not rigged capitalism because wealth inequality is lesser. It's like capitalists haven't rigged the game. This has always been the game. The game is class struggle, and they've just been kicking our ass for a long time, right? We've just haven't been organizing and haven't been fighting back directly, haven't been organizing at the workplace. We've been convinced that socialism could never work. You know, a lot of people have been convinced that unions are bad and the government is busting up their unionizing rights out of their own self-interest. What a joke. As we said, the government is a dictatorship of capital. Of course, that's not what they're doing. But this is not a rigged game. This is what the game's always been. There have been times where we've, you know, as a working class, as the working mass, we've been losing this game of class struggle less. You know, that like the early 1900s when conditions got really, really bad and people started getting organized and fought for all these social welfare reforms. You know, at that point, the game of class struggle was tilting more in the favor of the workers than it is today. But especially in the last 40 years, starting with Ronald Reagan, the capitalists have dominated this game of class struggle. And it's not rigged. I mean, it kind of is, but this is built into the relations of production, which is how Marx was able to analyze accumulation and concentration, these phenomena we're still seeing develop within capitalism today in the 1800s. You know, Marx was able to see it all that ways back.
In my mind, first, our Medicare for all, because everybody deserves healthcare as a human right, and we're just catching up to the rest of the developed world if you do that, and you get rid of a giant bill, which is a problem for a lot of Americans. Medical bills is one of the top causes of bankruptcy. Take that off the table. Medicare for all for everybody now, and also universal basic income. I mean, there's your UBI right there. It's $1,144 more every month, every year. That's if we just kept the system functioning in the same level of income and wealth inequality as we had during the golden age of economic expansion.
So you want to fight for more reforms that they're going to dismantle? Right? You want to fight for more half measures, more, you know, slight policies to make sure that working people aren't dying in mass every day of things like medical debt and inability to afford healthcare so that we can maintain the current system. Just put in these tiny small reforms or fight for these little reforms that the capitalists are going to eventually undo or cut into, you know, but at least it'll, you know, allow for capitalism to be maintained. For the U.S. empire to maintain their security. You know, we're still going to have a dictatorship of capital. The state is still going to belong to the capitalist class, and they're not going to give us an inch unless they think that we're literally going to destroy them unless they give us some kind of reforms. But, at that point, we should just completely destroy them and take full political power for the working class. It's the only way. That's the only way. You have to turn the government into a dictatorship of the workers. Otherwise, it will always be a dictatorship of capital. They're always going to bail out the big banks and the big corporations in times of economic crisis, and they're never going to give us Medicare for all. And also, I'm getting a master's degree in healthcare administration right now. I promise you, Medicare for all is not even close to good enough to fix our system. Right? People say that Obamacare was a half measure. No, Obamacare is an extremely far-right capitalist system of healthcare, a system of insurance. Medicare for all is, Medicare for all is the half measure, right? But corporations have their hands in everything. Capital has concentrated and accumulated at the top in healthcare. You have these giant conglomerates like CVS Group, which are made up of not just insurance companies, but pharmaceutical companies or pharmaceutical shareholders, people who own shares in this, in ambulance companies, in providers, in company or corporations who own hospitals. And not only is all of healthcare commodified, not only are shareholders making money off medicine and off the hospitals and off the ambulances and not just off insurance, right? But they're all intertwined. They're all these things are owned by these conglomerates of a very few banks and shareholders. So we need to target those conglomerates, nationalize them, make them public, decommodify healthcare completely, or our system's still going to be terrible. And our system's still going to throw 60% of the country into medical debt, which is an insane stat. Yes, we need Medicare for all. Yes, the insurance companies are the worst part of our system. They're literally a mafia who does nothing in relation to healthcare. They just sit in between you and your healthcare and rob you. They're the worst part. But getting rid of that doesn't fix capitalism. It does not fix the healthcare system. It doesn't decommodify the system. The problem is that they're making profit and making surplus value off the system at all, that they're exploiting people with the system at all. It should be a public system. But that's socialism, and that's evil, and that's off the table, right? And then as for UBI, universal basic income, that is a Milton Friedman policy from 1962. That's just what it is. It was called the negative income tax back then. And the whole idea of the UBI is to maintain capitalism, right? The UBI is tax capitalists a little bit because they're not going to give workers an inch unless you force them to. Give some of that money to workers so they can keep buying stuff, continue consumerism, and continue to keep the capitalist profits really high. And this is Milton Friedman's paper about the negative income tax when he came up with this idea. But all this does is maintain corporate profits and maintain consumerism. Does nothing to fix U.S. and foreign policy. Does nothing about our entirely too bloated military budget. Does nothing to change the system systematically. Neither, and Medicare for all only changes the system in terms of insurance. We need to target the relations of production. We need to nationalize vast sectors of the economy and move them into public hands, move them into the hands of the workers, reinvest the surplus value of these oil companies and of these healthcare conglomerates and whatever else, and reinvest it in our people, in social welfare programs. And we also need to get our people organized into unions and organs of working class power. Attacking the foundations of capitalism, not just making reforms that are ultimately half measures. And the thing about UBI is, that is a capitalist reform to its core. There's a reason Milton Friedman was such a big advocate of the UBI, one of the most staunch neoliberal, trickle-down, dogmatic capitalists who I think worships the invisible hand of the free market, or what he calls the invisible hand of the free market, even though the market leads to monopolization and no free markets. But what happens with UBI and why it was first invented is because it's a scheme to force people into the workforce and out of unemployment. So the idea is you pay everybody unemployment benefits. So then there's no purpose in being on unemployment. So for one, this hurts disabled people, because what always happens if UBI or negative income tax gets enacted is the government says, or the pro-capitalist bourgeois parties come out and say, why are we giving people welfare, right? Why are we giving people checks for disability? You already get disability checks via the UBI. Everybody gets disability checks. So it disproportionately hurts disabled people. So it's an ableist policy in that way, because it makes or it takes away checks for the disabled. Two, employers realize that they can depress wages. They can lower wages and pay people less than what their workers need to survive, less than what they need to buy their means of subsistence, because the government will just pick up the slack, right? The government is going to pay people anyways what they need to survive, so the capitalists can just depress their wages way lower, artificially. And this decreases economic productivity and technological advancement, because capitalists realize if wages are really low, it doesn't pay to invest in developing the means of production, expanding the means of production, expanding technological productivity. Because normally that would allow them to get rid of some of their workers because of the increased productivity of labor that comes from technological advancements, which is bad how capitalism throws workers into unemployment when technology advances. But economic progression, economic advancement and development and increases in technology are good overall. And the UBI leads to a vast decrease in that. Again, maintaining capitalism, stopping the means of production from developing to the point where they show the inefficiency of capitalism, preventing the means of production from developing at all, and maintaining the capitalist system. And actually even making it a worse capitalist system for disabled people and others. So UBI is not going to fix anything, right? It's not even a reform. It helps the capitalists, and Medicare for all would be great. But we need the workers to take political power. We need a dictatorship of the proletariat. And we need to start nationalizing these big sectors of economic power, the telecommunications, the oil, the major industries, the banks, and make these work for the workers. Take them from the capitalists completely. Who cares about these giant shareholders who have been robbing us for this long? I sure don't. They've been fighting the class struggle. It's about time we fight back.
Those are the first two things that pop in my mind. And now we need it more than ever. I mean, listen, we got to learn from history, learn from what FDR did with the New Deal. Yes, we could do a Green New Deal, emphasis on the New Deal part, create millions of, good paying jobs that are in renewable and green energy and technology. Definitely can do that. Rebuild our infrastructure all across this country, make it an A+. But we need Medicare for all, and we need UBI. We have to radically change the country, because we can't keep going like we're going right now. And if this article is true, and I think it is, that is effectively the 1% robbing all working people in this country, and they've been doing it your entire life. Your whole life.
We need to learn from history and learn from FDR. Yes, we do. We need to learn that class struggle, that organized workers forced FDR into every single reform that he enacted. That workers who were angry after the Great Depression, and workers who were looking at the economic growth in the Soviet Union and demanding that the U.S. move towards socialism, 1 million card-carrying communists, forced FDR's hand. And Kyle's taking the totally wrong conclusion of this from this. We need to learn from history and do what FDR did. No, we need to realize that all of the reforms enacted under FDR were, one, forced by the working class via class struggle, not granted to us by the benevolent politician FDR. And two, they've been dismantled by the capitalist class since then. FDR had most of his reforms repealed. So what we should learn from history is that we need to seize government power for the workers completely. That, begging the capitalists for reforms is not going to do anything. That voting for AOC and Bernie Sanders every year and hoping that they actually fight for us in Washington is not going to cut it. They're not going to fight for us. AOC and these people have proven that over and over and over again. And no offense to Kyle, it was an honorable effort, but he started the Justice Democrats. His idea like 8 years ago was we're going to have all these Democrats who don't take corporate PAC money, and they're going to be uncorrupt, and they're going to take over the Democratic Party and fight for Medicare for all. We can't even get AOC and the squad to force the vote, right? They won't fight for us at all in Washington, which is what Lenin's been saying from the beginning. You can't vote your way out of capitalism. You can't vote your way out of a dictatorship of capital. When are we going to start organizing ourselves and fighting back ourselves rather than just voting for the squad, donating a couple dollars of our paltry wages to the squad and praying to God that they actually fight for us or do something for us.
And they've been doing it your entire life, your whole life. Because some people will listen to, when we talk about UBI, they'll look at it as like, it's welfare. You're getting something that you're not owed. Wrong. The welfare has always cut in the other direction. It's working people giving welfare to the wealthy. There is class war in this country, and it's waged by the rich on working people. All the rules are rigged in their favor. When corporations and wealthy individuals give money to the politicians, and then the politicians turn around and give them giant subsidies and giant bailouts, that's welfare. That's the thing that you're supposed to be against. That's money for absolutely nothing. It's the corrupt system. That's what that is. And so when one of us says, hold on, I want to eliminate that welfare, and I just want to give the people what they're owed. If you want to just give the people what they're owed, working people got 50 trillion coming now, don't they?
I mean, this is where Kyle's analysis is really good again. Everything he said about class war, and about how the capitalist class have been the ones waging the class war, and we haven't been fighting back. That's true. And, that leads to a dictatorship of capital, leads to them controlling the government and doing giant subsidies and bailouts in times of crisis. Again, that's true. But when are we going to actually fight back? When are we actually going to organize our workplaces and fight back instead of just waiting for the squad to do it for us, which they're never going to do? And if we're going to give people what they're owed, as Kyle said, give them what they're owed, that's everything. Everything is created by the labor of workers. Capitalists do nothing but shuffle money around. Everything is created by the labor of workers. So what Kyle's doing is he's comparing what workers make now when they're super exploited after 40 years of neoliberalism and crushing of working class organizations, comparing that super exploitation to a previous time in history when there was less exploitation, right? And then saying workers are owed this. The super exploited workers should be paid what the regularly exploited workers were paid in the 60s or whatever, when workers were slightly more organized so they were able to fight against their own exploitation. But labor creates all profits. All profit and surplus value that the capitalists take is theft of value that is created by labor. Which is why even when workers were more organized and when they were exploited less and when we had certain reforms enacted, it didn't last. Right? It didn't last. The capitalists regained full control, busted up the worker organizations, and exploited them to the max. So the solution isn't to be like, oh, I remember, when we were a little bit less exploited by these giant corporations in the 60s. Let's go back to that. No, the point is to get more organized than they were in the 60s, learn from our mistakes, seize political power from these greedy corporations who want to push us into a nuclear war with China and Russia while doing nothing for the working masses and allowing us all to live paycheck to paycheck and in severe debt. Take political power from them and begin changing the relations of production. Begin moving the means of production into the hands of the workers by reinvesting the country's economic surplus. Begin nationalizing major sectors of the U.S. economy, using the political power, the government that workers have taken, to take these corporations, to take the means of production out of the hands of these shareholders who have been robbing us and super exploiting us and sending our children of working families to fight and die in imperialist wars for expansion. Seize their means of production and use all the wealth that's created by human labor and the means of production combined, and use that wealth in investing in society and creating a society based on human flourishing rather than the exploitation of one class by another, which is what our current society is entirely based on.
give us Medicare for all. We got to do a UBI. I like the way Andrew Yang frames it when he says, what does he call it? Freedom dividend? Something along those lines? Like, the idea is, no, you're a stakeholder in America. That's what you are. So in the same way that if you own a blue chip stock, you get paid. If you're born in America, you're an American citizen, there's a freedom dividend. There's an American payment. It's Social Security for all. That's more my framing than his framing, that part. But yes, you're part of this country. You're not getting anything you weren't owed. This is part of the deal. And if anything, the wealthy and the corporations have been robbing this country blind for decades, ever since they started allowing money in politics.
I mean, Andrew Yang is a capitalist, and you can really see with the way he describes his policy, right? The freedom dividend isn't a bad name, but he's like, you're a shareholder in America, right? You're a stakeholder. It's everything is framed through a capitalist lens, through a bourgeois lens, right? We need to give the exploited people more money, and maybe then they could start a small business and become the exploiters, and we can bring back the American dream. And economically, this stuff's never going to stop accumulation, and it's never going to do anything to stop capitalism because it doesn't target the capitalist relations of production. It doesn't target the capitalist worker relation where the capitalists own the means of subsistence and everything we need to survive. So the vast majority of society is forced to sell their labor for a wage in order to survive. Right? It does nothing to change those relations. It actually helps maintain those relations because Andrew Yang is a capitalist. So everything, including how they argue in favor of the policy, is argued from a bourgeois lens. Right? You're going to be a shareholder in America. You're going to be just like Bill Gates. And also, Kyle says the corporations have been robbing us ever since they allowed money in politics. No, it was way before then. And this is the problem with social democrats. They look at politics first, the government first, and then economics. When in reality, the economic system and the relations of production are what control the government. So it hasn't been that the capitalists have been exploiting us, taking from the workers what the workers are actually worth and the wealth that the workers actually create, taking the vast majority of it. That didn't start with money in politics. Right? That led to money in politics. That exploitation led to accumulation of wealth, which the capitalist class then used to control the government more and more and more and more, to the point where we got Citizens United and they literally legalized bribery. But that didn't come before the accumulation. It helped lead to more accumulation after it happened and more capitalist control of the government. But it stems from the relations of production, from the exploitation at the core of the economic system. And if we don't attack that exploitation at the core, the government is always going to work as a dictatorship of the capital, the way it works now.
And so it's time to get back what we're owed. And this is unacceptable. And we need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we really okay with this? Are we really okay with 60% of businesses closing due to the coronavirus? And it's staying like that? Are we really okay with corporations consolidating and monopolies popping up and controlling markets and then jacking up prices and screwing people along the way and paying people crap? Are we really okay with that? Are we okay with the system continuing to be rigged in favor of the wealthy? I'm certainly not. We know the answers. We just have to fight for them and get them implemented. I really think the only way is a general strike, because the politicians aren't going to listen to us unless we make them listen to us. And the best way to do that is to cut off their money. How do you cut off their money? Stop working. But we all got to do it. We all got to get out there. We have to have a clear list of demands. And this is the only way we succeed, because divided, we're definitely going to fall, because we've been divided all along. And look at what they've been doing to us.
I mean, he's right. His sentiment there is totally correct. We cannot let the rich continue to do this, continue to run our country, or it's going to lead us into economic and political collapse. It's going to lead to total degradation for the working class. But the only way to do this is to enact socialism, is to organize workers to struggle directly against the capitalists and struggle directly for political power, and work to abolish the existing relations of production, put more of the centers of economic power into the hands of the workers. And the only way to do this is through ownership of the means of production. Only way to transfer ownership of the means of production is for the workers to seize the state. But he calls for a general strike there, which is, a good idea. And as he said, it results from workers, or it's workers withholding their labor because their labor creates all value, and that cuts off the capitalist money supply. And he talks about workers needing to be united because the capitalists have been united against us for so long. General strike is just such a utopian or anarchistic idea, you know. When is every worker in every major industry just going to simultaneously decide to do a strike? You know, never, unless you have mass organization, mass grassroots organization, mass education of the working class on political and economic theory. Because much of the working class doesn't even know that their labor is what creates all wealth. You know, they haven't even thought about it in that way. They don't realize that if they were organized into a union, they could strike or threaten strike and withhold their labor, which would stop the capitalist profits, which is all the capitalist wants. So really the power is in our hands. But it's organization and education which helps workers realize that the power is in their hands. And then there has to be mass strategizing and mass coordination to actually do something like a general strike or a general strike in a certain area. You know, and there's been so many like leftists or progressives or social democrats, you know, people who watch Kyle Kulinski who will just post like memes about how we need a general strike. It's like, yes, but you know, you can post as many Facebook memes as you want, and it's fine. But unless we have real grassroots organization and coordination between the working class, unless the working class actually sees themselves as a class, and actually sees themselves as engaging in class struggle against the ruling mass, you know, we're never going to be able to bring something like that into action. You know, and even more so than a general strike, we need strategic struggle. We need to form organs of working class power. Political parties like the Communist Party in the early 19th century that Kyle talked a lot about in this video, as one of the times when there was less exploitation and less wealth inequality. The Communist Party had 1 million members. Right? We need organs of working class political power. We need organs of direct worker power like the unions. You need to organize. We need people organizing their workplace, getting heavily involved in the unions, reading theory to educate themselves, developing tighter relations with the party, strengthening, you know, PSL or CPUSA, the working class communist socialist political parties we have in this country. That is the key. Reforms aren't going to do it. Reforms don't change the relations of production. Reforms don't lead to working class political power, and reforms are always eventually undone by the capitalist class. There is no reforming capitalism. We need to organize and fight against capitalism at its root. We need to fight against the relations of production, the capitalist relations of production, and wage slavery. Boom. Edwin Vargas, thank you so much for the $5 super chat, my friend. Thank you for your support. Absolutely love it and appreciate you so much. Says communists need to build legitimate institutions that mimic and can replace old institutions in the event of a revolution. Yes, and I actually had this written down. I had this written down at the end and I forgot to say it. We also, you know, after workers seizing political power, or even before they seize political power, need to create these democratic institutions, right? Create new institutions of working class political power, new institutions allowing socialists to control the government and control the economy, because we don't have those right now. You know, right now we have institutions that are set up to suppress the workers. That's literally it. That's what our dictatorship of capital is. So we can't just take up the ready-made state machinery, as Lenin would say. It wasn't designed to be a democratic system. It never was. It was always designed as a dictatorship of capital. So the key is in, you know, truly sublating society, truly moving towards a new kind of society where there are new institutions of working class power set up, completely new institutions. That mimic a dictatorship of the proletariat, a dictatorship of the working class, or facilitate that, and, you know, don't allow for a dictatorship of capital. So that's another very important point. Thank you, Edwin Vargas. Agreed. Just pointing to needing more than just calls for a general strike. Yeah. And there's a lot of that, and I get it. I get that people would like a general strike, you know, and a lot of people are just going to work every day being exploited, and they're hoping for something to change or something to, something radical to happen. But it doesn't work like that until you get organized, right? A ton of change can happen overnight, right? Like the Russian Revolution, 10 years before it happened, they never thought they were headed for a revolution. They never thought they were really headed for a socialist proletarian revolution. But there were many events that allowed the class struggle to progress very, very quickly, and allowed events to happen very, very quickly. But in the lead up to that, Lenin was talking about theoretical education and workplace organization, as well as community organization and organization of the peasants, which we're in a different situation here in the US. But so, if we're going to actually allow things to happen very quickly in reality, materially, we need to lay the groundwork for that. Mass education, theoretical education, which we're doing right here. Mutual aid, community organization, organizing your workplace, union efforts, getting organized in your workplace's union, getting organized in the Communist Party. So violence is likely inevitable, probably. The capitalists are always going to try and kill us. The Russian Revolution wasn't even that violent. True. Till the Civil War, till the counter-revolution. They just walked in buildings with guns and said, "This is ours." Yeah, pretty much. But revolution is a process, right? And socialism is a process of construction. The Russian Revolution didn't lead to socialism the next day, right? It led to workers controlling the government and then needing to build socialism, which is not easy. And which is why, as someone else was saying, Edwin Vargas, I believe, we need to build up democratic institutions, new institutions that facilitate worker control of the state. But Rome wasn't built in a day. You're darn right. So let me see if I missed any real hot questions or any interesting questions here. Anarcho-communism is utopian. I would agree. I think anarchism, I don't like how they call it anarcho-communism. Like, just call it anarchism. Because communism is its own thing. Communism can only be brought about through Marxism. They have no plan to reach it. Literally, it's just like, it's just people being naive, people who have internalized McCarthyite propaganda and have internalized bourgeois propaganda and the Red Scare. And they truly believe that socialism is the way forward, but socialism has never, ever, ever worked before. Right? It's failed miserably every time it's been tried, but when we enact it, trust us, it's going to work this time. But we're going to do anarcho-communism, which means we're not going to allow the government to do anything. It's like, then how are you going to transition? How are you going to nationalize major sections of economic power? How are you going to transition ownership of the means of production into the hands of the workers without a state or without using any authority because of your anarchist principles? It's just not going to happen. And the capitalists are going to use force. They are going to use the government. And they're going to seize power right back from you. And they're not going to allow you to control their wealth and their means of production. You have to be pragmatic and understand that this is a class war, a class struggle. And if we're naive and we're not pragmatic, and if we say, my morals make me an anarchist, because, I just don't want to organize the workers because that might lead to someone getting hurt. We're never going to overthrow capitalism. Revolution is risky. But what isn't risky in life, especially if you're a working class person risking your life every day, dangerous jobs and whatnot. Oh, Scruffo Capone's here. Great. Scruffo Pone. Let's see what he has to say. Anarchism is primarily a philosophical ideology because anarchists have morals and don't want to be associated with more than one genocide. So it's just useless. So Marxism and communism are for explaining reality. They're an ideology for explaining the real world. But anarchism is only for philosophy. right? It's just so we can feel morally superior to everyone and call everybody else a genocide denier. Yeah, socialism and communism for me are not about my own personal morality. Yes, it is in my own interest to advance the cause of the working masses and make our material conditions better. But I'm not a socialist or a communist just so I can feel morally superior to other people and call them genocide deniers on Twitter. I'm here to get to the truth. I'm here to fight against empire, and I'm here to fight for the working class, for socialism against capitalists and capitalism and the capitalist state. Thoughts on Mao Zedong? I love Mao. I've got a lot of videos talking about Mao. I've got one video talking about Mao's quotations or the Little Red Book. I got a video talking about the construction of modern China, which covers the era of Mao very closely. Actually, I will send that one in here. Midwestern Marx construction of modern China. China is how you say China in Spanish and Espanol. Oh, I've got 2 videos about Mao. Okay, hold on. I'll send this where we're debunking the infographics.
More power.
Infographics, crappy propaganda, imperialist YouTube show. Control V. There you go. Enjoy that. And then here's imperialism and the construction of modern China, which also talks about the economic policies under Mao. I hate that channel so much. Infographics, they suck. They are trash. Yes. I also dislike them. Oh, by the way, one sec. Let me pull this up. If people wanted more information on UBI, I know UBI can be confusing. Like when I explain to people that it, is basically Milton Friedman's negative income tax. That it's a right-wing policy. Because I know people who have gotten into Marxism from Andrew Yang, right? So they believed in this UBI, or it seemed like a good idea, and they're against giving it up. And UBI as a part of a transition to socialism, right, is a way to just redistribute a lot of wealth and purchasing power to the working class as part of a transition to socialism and an actual change of the relations of production. Then I would support it. I just don't support a UBI to continue capitalism. And we got in some knockdown, drag out fights about this on TikTok, me and some other people. And ultimately, I think people finally saw what me and others were saying, because some creators on TikTok with disabilities were getting on and saying, no, literally, this guy's right. UBI is going to lead to us losing our disability benefits. It's going to lead to us losing our welfare benefits, because the government is going to say everybody's getting unemployment benefits or everybody's getting disability benefits through the UBI, so we're not going to give you anything else. You darn dirty moochers. So if anybody is interested in more about that, this is a video from the great, the one and only Dr. Paul Cockshott, addressing the idea, talking about the economics of the idea, talking about the times that it's been enacted. Socialism is the lower stage of communism, true. Obviously Dr. Paul Cockshott has like the worst audio in the history of YouTube. But this video is a little better than some. I could always hear him. And I studied this video a lot when I was going through these TikTok arguments about UBI. This is talking about how labor productivity tends to decrease with universal basic income. So yeah, shout out to Dr. Paul. He's a G. Arguably, communism hasn't happened as of yet. Correct, it hasn't. Cockshott, LOL. Yeah, he's got quite the name, doesn't he? There you go. Enjoy Dr. Cockshott's video. Maybe I sent it already, but there you go. Maybe I sent it again. Okay. Paul Grapefruit Shot. Yes. Very immature, y'all. Very immature. Means disabled people might not get the free Medicaid, which is way more important to them. Yes. And Medicaid's way more important to all poor and working people because healthcare costs are just so ridiculous. So if we got a UBI, $1,000 a month, but they took Medicaid away, that would not be a net gain for most people. Most people would be losing money just using the UBI to buy private insurance, right? Mr. Midwestern Marx, how do we actually get to communism? Vanguard tactics. Everything I've been saying in this video, everything I've been telling Kyle Kulinski. Community organizing, workplace organizing, political organizing, and waging the class struggle, attacking capitalism at its foundations, getting your workplace to read theory. Was Kyle Kulinski on stream? No, I wish. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. Do you have any reading recommendations on planned economies, Eddie? Yes. Now I'm going to have to recommend another Cockshot video, and everyone's going to laugh at his name. But Paul Cockshot's Towards a New Socialism. Because Cockshot is a computer programmer, right? So he's up to date on a lot of stuff with technology and engineering and computer programming. So he's basically laid out in this video the problems of socialist economic planning, and not in this video, in this book, Towards a New Socialism, which we also interviewed him about, by the way. Talks about the failures of economic planning in the past, what we can do going forward, and how technology and advancements in computer programming have made it way, 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 way easier to plan a super efficient economy nowadays. Which is gets back to what Marx said, in that capitalism creates its own gravediggers, right? Advancements in technology and in programming technology have allowed for the software to come about under capitalism, which could be used for socialist planning, which is part of the reason why it's a bad thing that UBI increases in productivity and technology. So yeah, there's Towards a New Socialism, his book, which I highly recommend, and then I'll send y'all the link. We interviewed him about it. I'm such a fast typer. Well, he also uploaded it on his own channel. Oh, this is like the worst thumbnail I've ever made. Sorry, Cockshot. And sorry, audience, but there you go. There's our interview with Paul Cockshot about planned economies. Good stuff. Good stuff. And here it is. The worst thumbnail I ever made, but a great video talking to a great and wise man. Is that one in your online library? I don't know. I do not know. All right. Well, I want to talk about Andrew Yang's Forward Party too. I don't know if I want to watch Kyle Kulinski talk about it again, because Kyle is just going to talk about UBI, and I don't want to repeat everything I just had to say. And I'll try not to talk about UBI too much since we've already hit on it, but obviously I don't really believe in I don't believe at all in working through the Democratic Party. I was part of the Bernie campaign in 2020. I realized that the party will always coalesce against the pro-working class candidate. And y'all, when it looked like Bernie was going to win, early on, MSNBC and CNN had Democratic strategists on who were already floating the idea of not giving Bernie the nomination, even if he got the most votes. So even if Bernie won the nomination fair and square, there were MSNBC analysts saying, well, this is technically a party election, right? We're technically electing the leader of the Democratic Party. So this isn't a general election, so it doesn't need to be democratic. Even if the voters vote for Bernie, we could overrule it and vote for Biden just because we have to defeat Trump, or the superdelegates could put Biden in power, the party elites, which is insane, especially since the Democrats spent all of 2016 through 2020 spreading the Russiagate conspiracy and acting like Russia is what allowed Donald Trump to win the presidency, rather than Hillary Clinton being incredibly unpopular with the American people. So after they, claim that Russia subverted our democracy, they proceed to subvert democracy and openly subvert democracy when it helps them, when it helps their interests and helps them defeat someone like Bernie Sanders, who wants to fight on behalf of the working class within the Democratic Party, at least somewhat. And yeah, in 2020, the same WikiLeaks that that the DNC was claiming were coming from Russia, and this information was Russian misinformation to hurt Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. Part of what the leaked information actually was proof that the Democrats and the DNC rigged the election against Bernie in 2016, rigged the primary against him in 2016, allowing Hillary to win and eventually Trump. So, they're using Russia to distract from their own crimes and their own corruption, talking about how Russia subverted our democracy when they are the ones subverting our democracy. The DNC has never cared about democracy. They're an organ of the oligarchs to wage class struggle against the working mass. So, long story short, we do need, a communist party. Join PSL or CPUSA and, be as active as you can within it. Because we need real organs of working class power rather than the Democratic Party. But Andrew Yang's Forward Party, the party of UBI run by capitalist Andrew Yang, ain't it. It ain't it. This is not the party targeting the working class and advocating exclusively for the working class and their class issues. This is not the party arguing for a socialist economy or educating people about the capitalist relations of production, capitalist accumulation, capitalist concentration, capitalist imperialism. Right? This is a party that wants to maintain capitalism via UBI, via universal basic income, or what Milton Friedman called the negative income tax. So let's watch this interview with Jim Acosta of CNN grilling Andrew Yang about his party. I'm sure Jim Acosta, as the bourgeois Democratic Party ideologue he is not going to have the same critiques of Andrew Yang that I do. But this should be interesting to watch.
True loyalty doesn't come around often. These people have helped build this place from the ground up, so we're doing whatever it takes to help secure their future.
But people worry about another 2016 scenario where a third-party candidate like Jill Stein or Gary Johnson costs Hillary Clinton the election. Don't you think that putting yourself out there, putting this party out there as an alternative that appeals to some moderate Republicans could potentially throw the race to Donald Trump, put Donald Trump back in the White House? Is that what you want?
I'm the co-chair of an anti-extremist party. I ran against Trump. So I don't plan on doing anything that's going to increase Trump's odds. But again, 62%
Why not run as a
of
Democrat
Americans
again?
want a third party. And we are looking right now at a competitive U.S. Senate race as one example.
Sorry, y'all. I was reading the chat, and I honestly kind of spaced out and didn't even hear what Jim Acosta asked him. I'm going to replay it, but I'm guessing Jim Acosta said, what? A third party? A party outside the Democrats and Republicans? You're helping Trump. You're letting Trump win. Trump. We can't do anything good in this country because it'll help Trump.
Where a third-party candidate like Jill Stein or Gary Johnson costs Hillary Clinton, where a third-party candidate like Jill Stein or Gary Johnson costs Hillary Clinton the election. Don't you think that putting yourself out there, putting this party out there as an alternative that appeals to some moderate Republicans could potentially throw the race to Donald Trump, put Donald Trump back in the White House? Is that what you want?
These people disgust me. And this is, what made me so mad during the entirety of the Bernie campaign is they say these ridiculous things, these absolutely brain dead, disconnected from reality, batshit things, this batshit analysis that could only come from the mouth of a bourgeois ideologue trying to protect the American ruling class and the American corporations. And they just say it as if it's a known fact. We know that Gary Johnson and Jill Stein cost Hillary Clinton the election. No, Hillary Clinton was a historically unpopular candidate. Her husband, Bill Clinton, signed bills like TPP and NAFTA into law, which dismantled the Rust Belt, dismantled the manufacturing jobs that states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, even Wisconsin and Iowa were based upon. Allowed, opioids and things like that and drug addiction to flow into these places where the jobs had left. Massive increases in depression in these places. And then Hillary Clinton didn't even campaign there. She didn't even campaign in the Rust Belt because she just assumed they were all going to vote for her. But they didn't. They voted for Trump. And these people still can't criticize themselves at all. There's not even an ounce of self-awareness or an ounce of, okay, we messed up here. We should have campaigned in the Rust Belt, or we shouldn't have outsourced everyone's jobs and spent all our tax dollars on war, or we shouldn't have allowed the healthcare system to become completely commodified and rip people off more and more every day. We should have done something for workers so that they would vote Democrat rather than voting for Trump. There's none of that. There's no self-awareness. Right? It's all Jill Stein's fault. It's all Gary Johnson's fault. It's all Russia's fault. This CNN is bourgeois propaganda. If you think for some reason CNN and MSNBC are better than Fox News and Tucker Carlson or whatever, no, they are equally as bad. They are liars and they are pure corporate propagandists. Nothing more. And Jim Acosta, the fact that he's called a journalist or a reporter is an absolute joke. Yeah, let's attack the third parties who got like 2% of the vote, who were actually advocating for helping the working class and ending the wars, which, allowed them to get a little bit bigger than normal vote in 2016, despite CNN, MSNBC, and the entire corporate media apparatus shitting on them the whole time. It's all their fault. No, it's your fault because you didn't want to do anything for the working class. That's why I voted for Jill Stein in 2016, because she actually said she was going to help me and my family, unlike the rich assholes who you serve, Jim Acosta.
I'm the co-chair of an anti-extremist party. I ran against Trump. So I don't plan on doing anything that's going to increase Trump's odds. But again, 62% of Americans want a third party. And we are looking right now at a competitive U.S. Senate race as one example, where you have an independent, Evan McMullin, running neck and neck with a Trump-endorsed incumbent in an environment
but the Democratic
that,
Party
frankly,
in Utah,
the Democratic
Party out in Utah got behind Evan McMullin. Andrew, why not run again as a Democrat? If you want to be president, run again as a Democrat.
So, Jim, I haven't made any conclusions about 2024 except for the fact that the United States needs a unifying, positive third-party movement because we're getting increasingly polarized. And if it's not Trump, it's going to be a successor to Trump because this system is uniquely vulnerable to authoritarianism. You have a two-party system.
But I can hear the folks over at the White House. President Biden has had Republican.
A better system.
But President Biden, I can hear Democrats over at the White House saying President Biden has had Republican support on a number of agenda items. He is trying to work in a bipartisan fashion. Why not?
This is so stupid. Does anybody still, believe these CNN ideologues that they're actually concerned about Trump, that they think Andrew Yang is going to run and take votes from Democrats, which is going to allow Trump to hurt the working mass or hurt American democracy or whatever. They just don't want Trump to mobilize the, white working class again. They don't want Trump to prevent the Democrats from continuing their proxy wars in Eastern Europe and continuing their mass new Cold War strategy against Russia and China. Trump isn't part of the liberal establishment bourgeoisie. He's sort of an outsider. So even though he's a con artist who tricked the white working class into voting for him without actually doing anything for them, he's hated by the political establishment because they just want to continue with their imperialism and their exploitation unimpeded without any speed bumps. And also, this vote blue no matter who line is so ridiculous at this point for many reasons, but partially because the Democrats have refused to support Jeff Young. And they're actually attacking Jeff Young, who won his Democratic primary and is taking on Andy Barr, a right-wing Republican candidate in Kentucky. But because Jeff Young doesn't toe the establishment line on Ukraine, because he actually wants to invest the working people's tax money in helping them rather than sending it all to the Azov battalion and neo-Nazis in Ukraine, because he's actually principled, anti-war, and pro-working class, vote blue no matter who goes out the window. Now the Democrats love Andy Barr. Now they love the Republicans, and they're not worried about it at all. They're only worried about it when Bernie Sanders runs or, when someone tries to start a third party. That's the only time we need democratic unity, not when people unify against them, Jim Acosta and the disgusting democratic establishment of oligarchs, of lying smear merchant oligarchs.
Not try to support that as a Democrat. You were just a Democrat 10 minutes ago.
I support attempts to cross the aisle, but we can all see that 7 out of 10 of the Republicans that bravely voted to impeach Trump are already going to be out of Congress by the time January comes along. And the moderate population in both parties is unfortunately dwindling quickly. So the political incentives end up
Oh no, the moderates are going away? The moderates who continually vote for two bourgeois political parties, two bourgeois imperialist political parties, who take all your tax money and send your children to fight and die in imperialist wars. Oh no, I'm so sad people aren't supporting those parties anymore. I wonder why. It's almost like conditions are deteriorating as the capitalists maximize their exploitation and try desperately to enslave the world and hang on to their empire.
Disproportionately empowering the 10% of extremes on both sides.
But you're going to have to come up with policy
really
positions.
Negative results.
Right,
so
but
we
Andrew,
just need a better system.
Yeah, but Andrew, you're going to have policy positions at some point. How does the Forward Party feel about Roe versus Wade? Should it have been overturned?
Well, I personally think that women's reproductive rights are fundamental human rights, but the Forward Party has not left or right, but forward stance on even the most divisive and contentious issues.
Well, what does that mean? Don't you have to take a position on something? Don't you have to take a position on something? You can't just say, well, this is a hot button issue, so I'm not going to take a position on it. If you want to run the country, you're going to have to make some hard decisions, Andy.
Yeah, but you can have that kind of stuff decided democratically, right? Which is what I bet you Andrew Yang is about to say. He's going to say we need to leave those decisions up to the people, which is totally foreign to CNN, the defenders of democracy, CNN, MSNBC, and the Democrats. This idea that let's leave social views, or social positions up to the people, up to a vote. Maybe it's a local vote, maybe a national vote. That's totally foreign. No. We have to enforce our values on the people, and if the Republicans fight against Roe v. Wade and they take away our abortion rights, that's just a great way to mobilize people and get them to vote Democrat, and we don't actually care about the people, so it's perfect. Why not just keep fighting about these social issues endlessly, Andrew? Why do you want to leave them up to the people? Don't you realize that we can divide the working class with these issues? Basically what Jim Acosta's dumbass is saying without saying it. God, he's so dumb.
Andrew?
Again, the Forward Party is about that common sense consensus majority view, which is very clear on abortion. It's clear.
What about guns? What about assault weapons?
On climate change. It's actually clear on just about every issue under the sun.
Might as well just say, what about the culture war? Andrew, you're not fighting the culture war. don't you know that politics is about keeping the working class divided through identity politics? Right? You're talking about not left, not right, but forward. You're talking about organizing the working masses against the oligarchy. Would you shut the hell up and talk about gun control? Like, these people are so transparent.
Should 18-year-olds be able to buy
AR-15s? Because of the nature of our system.
Should 18-year-olds be able to buy AR-15s?
Again, the common sense consensus majority is that there should be some rules around background checks and access to firearms, but we're not getting any of these things, Jim, because the two-party system does not need to deliver.
But it doesn't sound like you're taking any hard positions. It sounds like you're
trade power.
It sounds like you're sort of a fill-in-the-blank party. If somebody.
The only positions they'll ask them about are social issues. Not what are you going to do for the workers? What are you going to do about the economy? What are you going to do about the healthcare system, which is the worst healthcare system in the entire world, where people pay the most money for the worst results and 60% of our country experiences medical debt at some point? None of those questions. They will never, ever, 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 ever talk about class, because they are defending the ruling class. They're defending their donors and corporate advertisers. And everything else, they use as a method of distraction. Oh, Andrew, you're a pansy. You're talking about economics and the workers. Why aren't you fighting the culture war? You're not taking any hard positions. You're trying to leave these issues up to the people. Democracy? Don't you know democracy is just a word? Just something you can say to justify anything? That's how CNN, MSNBC, and the liberal Democrats use the word democracy. We need to have this misinformation board that manages what people can and can't say and what they can and can't read. Does that sound authoritarian to you, this misinformation governance board? Or disinformation governance board run by the Department of Homeland Security? Well, we're doing it to save democracy. So, as long as we say that, it makes it true.
Wants a party with no clear policy positions, you're it. But unfortunately, in the real world, you have to take a position on something.
Well, we're for the common sense consensus view on guns, abortion, climate change, but we're not getting a common sense consensus
what are those positions?
On any of those things, Jim. And
those
Americans
are just sort of fuzzy,
why.
but those are fuzzy, nebulous. It sounds like you came up with something in a focus group. Common sense, middle of the ground. That sounds wonderful. That sounds great. But at the end of the day, don't you have to take a position on something?
Weren't you just saying that Joe Biden is doing a good job because he's reaching across the aisle and working across the aisle with Republicans? What the hell does that mean, Jim? One, the Republicans, the GOP, are a, horribly corrupt right-wing pro-war party. So why would you even want to work with them and those establishment corporate politicians? Also, that's just a fuzzy word that you guys use. Kind of like you use the word democracy. We're just going to reach across the aisle. And we're just going to be really bipartisan. And we're going to lead with our values. It's really good. And if you run against us, if you run as a third party, you're really bad because you're stopping us from reaching across the aisle and democracy and values. So, you really got to take a position on something, Andrew Yang. Yeah, shut up. I hate CNN.
Well, the great thing is the American people know where we want the country to go. And what we know that we need a more dynamic, truly representative system than we're getting right now, which is why the Forward Party is growing so quickly. Tens of thousands of Americans have signed up in all 50 states because we know that the two-party system is getting worse, not better.
And yeah, Americans do know what they want. They don't want an oligarchy. They want better wages. They want healthcare. A lot of Americans don't know that the solution for all these things and the way to fight our current problems is through socialism and anti-capitalist struggle. So, a lot of them fall into these things like the Forward Party. But, Andrew Yang's right. On the majority of issues, there's a sort of common sense consensus. Most Americans know how they feel and what they want. But what all working class Americans want is better wages, better standard of living, better access to shelter, better access to food, a safe and stable society to raise their children in. That's what I want right now. I want not this $100,000 cloud of student debt floating over my head. And I want to be able to work a job and know that I could support myself and a girlfriend and 2 or 3 kids. But right now I don't have that. I don't see that at all. Even if I get a pretty good paying job. And that's what a lot of young Americans are seeing. They're seeing no future for them economically. But of course, CNN will never even talk about that. They'll never even bring that up. Because if young Americans start organizing for themselves economically, that's going to hurt CNN's profit. That's going to cut into their exploitation. Wow, we have 95 viewers in this right now. Let's go. Thanks, everyone. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Or send me millions and bajillions of dollars via super chats so I can answer your questions. Talk about what y'all want to talk about, but whoa, you're saying your girlfriend can't support herself? Yes, no. 2 people heard it. He must have said Ford party. I thought he said that too. Just have the kids. Don't wait till you got enough money. All right. I'll do it. They'll be good little socialists. We need a dictatorship of the working class. You're darn right. I wouldn't be surprised 20 years from now to find out the CIA paid Yang to distract people from real revolution. Could be. Could be. I mean, he's certainly an interesting actor. After he ran for president, they offered him a job at MSNBC. They tried to filter him into the establishment. So maybe another sector of the of the ruling class. Or, we know the intelligence agencies work, not only out of the public's eye, but they do different things as the State Department and other sectors of the ruling class often, which is what happened with JFK, where you had the CIA was drawn into a conflict with the White House, where JFK was talking about how the CIA had screwed him over and made him look like an idiot during the Cuban Missile Crisis and almost led to nuclear war. So he was talking about abolishing them, and then JFK got killed. And it was the CIA, if you don't know. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Andrew Yang and the Forward Party. Do 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 do. Anyone have any news stories or anything they really want to talk about before we call it a day here? I have some more stream topics pulled up. But the one I wanted to talk about was if the US empire is destined to collapse like Rome. Which we covered a Vice video about that a while back and talked about the similarities between the US and Rome. But I think that's a little just off topic today. It would be a huge change of gears. So I think that's something we can save for tomorrow or the next stream. Maybe Friday, actually, because tomorrow I'm going to be on Coming from Left Field's podcast. Let me pull them up quick. I'm also doing a debate with libertarians soon, so stay on the lookout for that. Yeah, so Coming from Left Field, they're a cool podcast. They had Carlos on their show. Hit me up about coming on. I'm pumped. What time do I stream? Either around like 1 or 2. So either a midday stream or like maybe 11 to 2 is when I usually start those. Or it's at like 6 or 7, like we did tonight. We started at like 6:30 tonight. Or every once in a while we'll do super late night streams where we start at like 9. Can you explain how the fundamentals of unionism work? That's a great idea. Really, all I'll say right now, because we want to start doing like a class on how to unionize and how to, work within your union. But forming a union, you just have to get the workers on your side and realize that your boss, if he finds out about your unionizing efforts, he's not going to be happy and might fire you, depending on what kind of position the job is in, whether they can afford to fire you or not. Which it's also good to like work hard at work. I know you're being exploited, right? But you want to gain the respect of your coworkers, right? And you don't want your coworkers to think the socialist is just a shitty worker who doesn't want to do anything, right? So if you work hard, you make yourself invaluable to the company in some ways, not in every case, and you don't have to, work yourself to the bone. But if you're reliable, and if you're, valuable cog in the overall machine, and you cooperate with your coworkers well, your coworkers are going to be likely to follow you, are going to be likely to listen to you and be influenced by you and what you have to say. If you explain exploitation, from a Marxist perspective, pretty much every working class person is going to get it. Pretty much everybody who sells their wages or sells their labor for a wage, everyone who's a wage laborer, a wage slave, is going to understand it if you explain it from a Marxist point of view. You need to get a handful of people together to organize and reach out to an organization like IWW that can help you with that process. It's much easier in the UK than in the US, where we have all these union busting laws. But then if you have a union at your work, or once you form a union, learn how it works. Learn the ins and outs of the union. Learn the union elections. Learn the different factions within the union, what they advocate for. Maybe, you need to create your own faction and eventually run. But what you need to do is get as active within the union as possible. Get your coworkers respect. Get your coworkers thinking about exploitation and organizing, and then get them involved. All it takes is a bunch of people being really involved, giving whatever labor and mental willpower they have to the union, before you're really rolling and enacting some big gains. And my buddy joined the rail union like 3-4 years ago, and it's amazing how fast this has happened. It's incredible how fast I've watched him come to a position of power within the union, and earn the respect of all of his coworkers. And all of these, these exploited rail workers, a lot of whom are people who voted for Trump, right? A lot of whom are people who consider themselves conservatives. Once my buddy explained their interests, their socialist interests, their class interests, and how they could use the union as an organ, as a vehicle to fight for themselves, everybody was on board. And of course they're on board. Working people feel exploitation, right? They feel it every day, alienation and exploitation. They know at the end of the day they're getting screwed. If you explain it to them, if you explain the math or the logic behind exploitation and why we need to fight in our own interests, working people get it. They will get it. Just argue on the basis of class. Don't let the political mumbo jumbo fool you. This idea that all Trump voters are fascist and evil and we can never talk to them, even if they're at your workplace and they want to organize a union and go on strike. That is literally, I think, an idea pushed by the CIA to divide us, or the ruling class. This idea that everybody's a fascist who voted Trump. A lot of people were just confused and got tricked by the con man Trump, who promised to end the wars and fight for the workers. But if you actually give them something to believe in and something to fight in or fight for, that's actually in favor of fighting for the working class and ending the wars, you're going to sweep the country. You're going to get like 70 or 80% of the workers on board with this. It is possible. I promise, it's more than possible. We just got to keep organizing. Are you back on TikTok? I also like your short videos when I don't have much time. Yes, MidwesternMarks.com is the name of my TikTok account now. I didn't like the Eddie Liger Smith. I never liked that. Oh my gosh, that's so loud. I never liked the Eddie Liger Smith name that much, just because oops, why did I stop sharing my screen? just because it seemed individualistic, right? And Midwestern Marx has always been a collective. And I don't like when Midwestern Marx would just be associated with...
Dude, put a firecracker in there, put a carrot, cut it off, put a bunch of goop on it.
I did it again. So now we're MidwesternMarx.com. No more Eddie Liger Smith. And here's our profile. We're up to 67K again, everyone. Woo! We're up like 2,000 followers since the leftists tried to cancel us on Twitter. Marxist Leninists stay winning. What did I tell y'all? But yeah, this is the new account. Kayla Pop has been doing her video debunking her series debunking Ukrainian nationalism. I just been posting on here all the time because I always think of stuff I want to say in short videos. I guess the last thing we can talk about or react to here, I'll play what was my most viral video this week. This is something I've been wanting to do on stream. Just pick out whatever was my most popular TikTok and talk a little bit about it on the stream. So this one about Saddam Hussein's final speech that he gave as the leader of Iraq got over 100,000 views this week. A lot of people from Iraq commenting on it, various opinions. So let's check it out, and then we'll check out some of the top comments as well.
In 2006, after the invasion and occupation of Iraq, a sort of show trial was set up to prosecute Saddam Hussein. And it's interesting to watch. Saddam, of course, called out the U.S. for never finding the weapons of mass destruction that they used as justification to invade Iraq. Of course, later we found the U.S. was torturing people at sites like Abu Ghraib, saying, tell us that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction and we'll stop torturing you. Then when they got some confessions claiming that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, the invasion, which killed millions, happened. And this isn't to defend Saddam Hussein, although you should defend the people of Iraq who were slaughtered by the U.S. But this trial is just really interesting. In this trial, he calls out U.S. soldiers for torturing him and other high-level Iraqi officials, one who is in a wheelchair now permanently from his injuries. And the judge of the U.S.-backed court, as well as the prosecution, laughed at Saddam when he was saying this. But images have since come out proving what Saddam said. I'm not going to show.
And this image is really gross. It's Americans. They like American troops shove like American flags into Saddam's pants. And we're like literally like taking a picture of them like twisting his nipples in front of the camera. Just humiliation. Anti-Muslim acts, right? Because they're trying to humiliate people by doing things that are against their religion and against their culture's traditions. Just the most, like, as Richard Medhurst said, pig shit ignorance. Right? On top of invading in this country, occupying them, killing millions of people, destroying tons of historical sites that were left over from Mesopotamia, because that's what where Iraq is, the literal cradle of civilization. Destroying so much infrastructure and productive economic activity. Just the most ignorant, destructive, imperialist war in capitalism's history. And on top of it, you know, they had to torture and mock and abuse the Iraqi leadership who they were overthrowing, who the U.S. helped put in power. You know, the U.S. helped put Saddam Hussein in power, and he served them. It was only when there was, you know, socialist organization and socialist demands and anti-imperialist demands from the Iraqi people, saying, you know, quit allowing the U.S. to just siphon the oil out of Iraq. And Saddam Hussein tried to adjust Iraq's oil quotas with the U.S. That's when Dick Cheney and George Bush committed what Noam Chomsky calls the crime of the century, invading Iraq and causing all that destruction.
Show all of them because they're graphic and I'm going to get banned, but you can look them up. Crazy. Our government's criminal. In 2000.
And I hate how I have to say in this video, right? This isn't me defending Saddam, because, like, who cares? Saddam's trial is a major historical event and a majorly important event for understanding Iraq today, understanding the U.S. empire today, and understanding the whole world today, right? But you have to be like, because Americans just make a moral judgment about everything, and they just, compress everything to individualism, and because they're anti-intellectual AF, they'll just be like, why are you defending Saddam? Oh, you're against the Iraq war and the mass torture of Iraqi government officials? Oh, you love Saddam. And I even said
This is a comment about the. In 2006,
I even said this. I hate how I have to premise this with, this isn't me supporting Saddam, because Americans can't just watch something and learn without making a personal moral judgment about it. And then let me scroll down here and find it. Someone said this. Maybe they deleted their comment because I ratioed them. Oh. Bro defending Saddam Hussein. I don't know if y'all can even see this comment. That's what it says. This bro out here defending Saddam. Bruh. I literally said in the video, this isn't me defending Saddam Hussein. The video you just watched. But you had to come in my comment section and do your stupid liberal moralism. Oh, this guy doesn't defend torture and the brutal slaughter of millions of Iraqi civilians. Why are you defending Saddam Hussein, bruh? Shut up, Dom. Americans are so ridiculous. You know, we're less shocked and appalled and offended and triggered by an invasion and occupation that killed millions of people for oil profits than we are, you know, about an American potentially saying something good about Saddam Hussein, this leader who the U.S. turned into a comic book villain so they could kill millions of people for oil. All right. Well, y'all, thank you for hanging out with me today. Saddam was an agent of the CIA before he was a politician in Iraq. Yes. And at the beginning of his trial, he says, you know, for years I have served you well. Probably talking to the U.S. Before they decided to turn on him. But anyways, thank you all. We've been going on for over 2 hours. It's been a great stream. Really enjoyed talking with y'all, interacting with the chat. Really enjoyed the videos we reacted to today. Felt like it was a productive stream. Everyone learned. I learned some things. Y'all learned some things, hopefully. So I'll try and get these videos up on YouTube as soon as I can, hopefully tonight. And yeah, tell your friends, like, comment, subscribe, share the stream, share the YouTube. Support us on Patreon at Midwestern Marx. Solidarity, everyone. Much love. Organize your workplace, organize your community. Thank you for all your support. Midwestern Marx forever.